Hey, welcome back to Drawing with Abby.
Hi.
Sorry we've kind of taken a little break, but we really want to record this video a while ago.
Yeah.
And or a couple weeks ago. And life, I'm sure you guys all know how it goes. But today's episode, we want to talk about, again, kind of a very hot topic in the art community, but the ethics of AI-generated art.
Yeah. I know it seems like we've been talking about AI a lot, but it's such a transformative thing, and new things are happening like almost every week. So it warrants, an open discussion about it.
Yeah.
It's like a continuing dialogue about what's going on, how we feel about it, and just sort of how we see everyone else react with it.
Right. Yeah. And like we want to talk, we've been thinking a lot about it, right? The creativity, like the creative outlet. What's going to incentivize people to do it or continue to have human generated artwork, right?
Yeah.
Then there's authorship, then there's labor, and then the human expression. It all comes up as a question mark, how that's all going to play out in the future as AI gets better and better. And this all stemmed really from the Ghibli art studio a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that whole controversy about, essentially what happened, if you guys are unaware, I doubt any of you, like, I'm sure everyone sort of encountered it, but for just like high level, a couple of weeks ago, ChatGPT updated their Model O to include image generation. So they've always had DALL-E as their image generation, but this new model is a significant upgrade. Like, the biggest thing is that it can render text within the image properly, which if you're a graphic designer is kind of a large thing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that it can do is that it can replicate an art style and apply it to either a prompt or a reference image, which is something that people kind of... So it started with this tweet. I forget who did it, but someone like transformed a photo of their family, like their vacation photo, into a studio, like as if Miyazaki himself had illustrated that photo, and it looked great. It looked very convincing.
Yeah, it's very cute too, and his style is amazing, right? So like,
So and then it took off, and it became sort of this viral trend. Even people who didn't know Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli as a whole were
exposed to it.
Were transforming their images into this thing, and it
Me personally,
sparked the whole conversation.
I don't know his style all that well. When I saw it, I was like, oh, this is cute. I want to do this too. Only to realize, oh my gosh, this is how it was generated. But where I guess my question here is, why did it become a problem, or, like raise up an uproar in the community of art where like under the Ghibli studio? But like here, there's so many things. Like you could do Disney, you could do Elsa, you could do all these other you could copy all the other characters. So why specifically Ghibli? Did that make a difference?
Well, first of all, it was a viral trend. So it could have been anything, but it was a viral trend, and it really sort of highlighted, because the thing about Studio Ghibli is that, unlike Disney and other studios, that studio is really sort of built on the artwork of Miyazaki. Like, he's this incredible storyteller, storyboard artist, filmmaker, and he has a very distinctive style. You can see differences in styles in the different films that he's made, but there's like a core element to it. And whereas like Disney is like a bunch of different artists applying their style to Disney films. Whereas this is a singular artist with a singular vision.
So I guess that's why
it's hard. It kind of sparked a conversation because it was so obviously taking on the art style of this artist that, famously does not like AI. He sees AI sort of the death of the creative experience.
Is he the one that only draws on paper?
Yeah, he only draws on paper.
Yeah.
He's never made the transition to digital. He's always been wary of digital art, and he's seeing in his mind this whole AI wave. It was just like the natural evolution of going into digital art. Like he saw this as being sort of commoditizing art in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you know, I guess today we want to talk about really the issue, right? Where that stemmed from. And then kind of the different there's like different buckets, right? Regulation, ethics behind it, how to how to solve this problem, right? Of monetizing or authorship, like making sure the credit is given where it's due.
Okay.
So, we started off talking about the Ghibli studio and how where the problem rooted from. Now, I guess one of the things that that really stood out to me is the ethical aspect of it, right? Because there's positives and there is, I guess, the the negatives. Okay, let's just call it negatives. So the positives of using AI, it could democratize art, right?
Yeah.
And then assist creators, serve as brainstorming tool. Like even the other day you were telling me that you were designing this poster for a family event and you could use AI to do something that would have taken you an hour to 15 minutes, right? And that's where we want it to go. We want technology to help our lives, enhance our lives and make it better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all the kind of the negative aspect of it is copyright and people's work and labor and the labor.
Yeah, because he's kind of the poster child.
He's the poster child, but there's other
big players and
big players, exactly. And me personally, I'm a deep seeker. I love DeepSeek.
Yeah.
I just find it so.
you do all your research on something.
And the prompts are so much like I don't have to give it too much. It just knows me or understands, right? And I know it gets better and better, but I don't use it nearly as often enough. But it still has a good understanding. So we're in this ethical issue, and where I guess my question is like, how do you see this being resolved?
So let's talk about the ethics of it, right? So the issue here with Studio and Ghibli is that there is a copying of an artist's style to reproduce work in a way that the artist wasn't involved with. He didn't get permission for it. He didn't was not actively involved with the creation of the artwork. So that brings up, what are the ethics about generating art that references another artist's style?
Yes.
So, you can immediately say that's wrong.
Yeah.
And that seems like a perfectly, natural reaction to that. It's like, oh my gosh, you're stealing that artist's art style. But what is an art style?
Yeah.
Right? If you're at home watching this and if you ever had to describe your art style to another person who hasn't seen your work, and you're verbally describing to them, what your work looks like, a shorthand for describing your work is like, well, it's like artist X, but with a little bit of artist B, or it's artist C, but in this completely different genre, right? We are all inspired by what we see, the artists that have come before us, and the artists who are producing work today, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are an amalgamation of our inspirations.
Yeah.
So there is an argument to be said that, the same way that we, intake all these influences and then output something into our own creation, the AI modeling is doing, right? I would say that's a false argument because it's missing that important element, which is you, right? You may be influenced by an artist, but you're not taking in the entirety of that artist. You're picking and choosing what it is you like about that artist. You're modifying that in some way. whether if it's because you're limited in your technical skill or you want to push in a different direction, and you're mixing and matching different influences at the same time, right? So there's a personal element that you're bringing into it. So I don't think that's when people bring that comparison, I don't think it's a full comparison. I think it's an incomplete comparison.
So what about the person that's prompting?
The person that's prompting in the in the post that we've seen, they're literally just saying in the style of
Right. But there's others that, like, we're also, okay, Studio Ghibli's one way of using it, right? But there is others that are doing it, like asking AI to use Ghibli style under Disney, under Moana, or something like that, right? And you're giving that prompt and direction because you yourself have that vision and you're asking AI to create it.
Right. So is that okay? So there's another interesting example. So I think last week I was on my Instagram feed and I can't remember the artist's name off the top of my head. I'm so sorry. I'll include it in the show notes.
Yeah.
When we post this. But he had this like funny idea of taking the Peanuts, which is the artist's name, something Schultz. It's Mark Schultz or something. But he has that very distinctive Snoopy, Charlie Brown art style. And he basically redrew scenes from Indiana Jones in that art style. And it made, this action adventure character cute and relatable and funny and sometimes like sad. So it was what I as I came across my feed, I was enamored with it. I loved it. I was like looking through the whole carousel of it. But
only to realize it was AI generated.
No, he drew it.
Oh, he drew it.
He drew it. But my point is, he took two different inspirations that he didn't own. Mm-hmm. He aped this art style of an existing artist, and it put it into a different genre, a different context that the artist never drew in. Yeah. Didn't ask the artist for permission to do that. Yeah. He was just inspired and influenced.
And he did it. So that no one's going to really...
So... But yeah, that's a case of a human artist being inspired by another artist's style and using it in a way that artist never intended.
Mm-hmm. But so the big question is, this guy put effort, his time, his knowledge, his wisdom, his inspiration, his talents into creating something that is enjoyable. And you clearly enjoyed it. And then the same person, let's say me, who have zero artistic abilities, go and thought of the idea.
Or it's just the creativity.
Exactly. Prompted that and then tweaked it to the way that I wanted it to. And if I produce the same thing, is that the same?
Is that any better?
Is that any better? Is that worse? Is that unethical?
You can argue it's not as good because there's not that same level of craftsmanship applied to it. So there's an argument there. But in terms of ethics, is it any ethically better? I would say they're both working on the same ethic, like playing field, right?
Well then, but this is the thing. It took me 5 minutes, let's say. Mm-hmm. It took that person
maybe a couple hours. Yeah.
And it's the effort now, the time and effort that goes into.
So you can appreciate the craftsmanship, right? But is it ethical? Because the issue isn't so much the technology. The controversy itself is about the ethics of it. Who owns that art style? No, Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli own the art style, or do they own their intellectual property, which is the characters in their movies? Mm-hmm. So that's a question. I think a lot of artists are coming down on the side of AI is evil, but they're not looking at the nuance of the argument. Is what is your property? Is your art style your property, or are the characters and the stories you create your property?
So we were also talking about this when it comes to, like, when I asked you, why did this studio thing blow up? There's other art styles and bigger, giant conglomerates. And the other element is that Studio Ghibli is probably a smaller, right?
Yeah, it's a smaller
because of that, because of that, they were able to, or they got, this is a bigger impact for them in a way, right? Whereas, like, if this happened to Disney, I don't know if, like, I'm sure there's prompts that say, hey, make my daughter look like Elsa, right?
Right.
And it didn't take off necessarily,
Right.
right? And we were talking about it earlier, like when we sell products or when we buy products, whether we go to Walmart or wherever we go, and there is Bluey and there's Elsa, Frozen, and like all the Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse. Like I'm always wondering like how are royalties paid to the company so that these manufacturers or or distributors are able to sell these products and make profit off of them, right? So in that same way, can we not do the same thing with OpenAI?
Right. So that's what a lot of artists are arguing for, is that there should be some sort of compensation or an opt-in, opt-out model for these training models. And I agree with that. If you're going to use other people's work to help train your model, that needs to be recognized in some way.
Yeah.
So if, let's say, you upload your artwork on Shutterstock, right? It's a stock sharing platform. And, typically the way it works in the past is like, I made an illustration, I'm going to upload Shutterstock. And whenever someone downloads it, I get a commission from that, right? But let's say OpenAI wants to come along and train its entire model on the library of Shutterstock, right? Shutterstock presumably would give OpenAI a licensing fee for that, and then would have to pay like a portion of that to all the artists that's being trained on that database, right? So whatever that worked out, 50 cents, whatever. But, me as an artist uploading to Shutterstock, in that terms of service, I'm acknowledging that they in some way own that artwork when I upload it, right? So I am giving up a bit of ownership when I'm uploading to platforms like that. However, on other platforms like Instagram or like social media, they also have terms like that where like they have the right to train their data if you upload it to their platforms. Some of those platforms are now offering opt-ins.
Oh.
I forget which one does it. It's probably not Instagram. Well, some of those platforms offer you the chance, if you dive into your settings, see like, say, I do not agree to third-party platforms, reading my data. But if you're on your, like, let's say you're posting on your blog, on your personal website, that stuff is still exposed to robot callers and that sort of stuff. And so that I have a problem with, because you're not posting that on someone else's platform where they have the right to say, like, we own this now because
you're putting it on the internet.
It's literally my own website, my own blog, but it's still at risk of being scanned by all these bots out there and being fed into these models. Well, it's OpenAI.
And, now that kind of takes me to the regulation and like the future where this can be leading to. So yeah, the opt-in that you touched on. I don't know, like, so the closest thing that I thought of when we spoke earlier is Castle. So if you're here in Canada,
Europe has their own version of it.
They have probably.
It's called something different.
Do they have in the US?
No, I don't.
No. So here in Canada, we have something called Castle, and you have to. It's for email. So if you get an email and you want to opt out of it, you have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Given the permission to do that.
You're all of a sudden you're on a mailing list that maybe you signed up 5 years ago on, and you're like, oh, I don't want to borrow this anymore.
Yeah, and you know what? Remember, like, back in the day, we sent those chain emails that would come through?
Yeah.
I think it helped eliminate.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, I was thinking, okay, well, the castle seems to be working. It's regulation by the government.
Yeah.
And yeah, we still get lots of garbage emails, but you're more than welcome to go and opt out of it, and that will take care of that problem. But in that same capacity, who is regulating that? If you're in violation of Castle, how do you get
enforcement?
Enforced? Yes, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I think there is probably some sort of procedure, but if you're a small XYZ company, it's hard to regulate that. Now, in that same capacity and same token, can we do that for artists? So if you opt out of OpenAI or any of the other AI, multitude of AI platforms, can you opt out of it? And is that going to be acceptable by these companies, right?
Yeah. I mean, the ideal future is that if you, because I think the cat's already out of the bag in terms of like these bots crawling internet and gobbling up all the data. But one way I can see them,
No, but recreating, right? That's the other thing.
well, again, these models exist. You can copy them, you can distribute them. So I would say that ship sailed. But what I would say an easy way for these big companies to address that is have a portal system where you can log in and say like, hey, this is my content. In some way you can verify ownership of this content. Like, this is my artwork, this is my essays, whatever. Please exempt this from your model. And it would have to go in and remove that from the model. That is a form of regulation that I could see the government forcing these companies to do, giving content creators or people generating all this content to go into those models and saying, hey, you can't use this, right? Because the cat's already in the bag of like what it's been exposed to. But moving forward, giving people the ability to opt out the same way people can opt out of newsletters they don't want to be involved with anymore. I can definitely see that being as a reasonable thing that can be implemented.
Right.
Or a practical, I wouldn't say reasonable, a practical way for that to be implemented.
So we were talking about this earlier, and I thought that was so interesting about what OpenAI or Sam Altman, what are they trying to root for in terms of regulation when it comes to copyrights?
I mean, Sam Altman's on record saying that he wants essentially lawmakers to revisit what copyright means in this new era. Companies like OpenAI and Andromeda, or I forget what they're called. There's Gemini, there's Grok, and then I forget the other one. But they
Copilot, yeah.
Copilot and then apostrophe. No, it's not apostrophe. It's something else. They all want free access to all of our data. They want to be able to crawl and train their models on data without paying for it or facing any consequences for it. That is their ideal future for them. But at the same time, they want to protect their own intellectual property.
So that's hilarious to me. It's like, well, if you
believe in this future of no copyright, then there is no future of intellectual property.
Yes, so your intellectual property should be out in the open as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's their idea. And the tactics that, at least that I've seen them use right now, is the fear tactics. It's like, well, if you don't give us unrestricted access to everyone's data, and if you start regulating us now, then China is going to have the best AI. Or another country is going to have the best AI, and the U.S. will fall behind. That's sort of their scare tactic right now. I don't know how much of that is true. I mean, we've all seen China emerge as being a direct competitor with DeepSeek and what's the Alibaba one called? QC?
Yeah.
Something like that. And they're very good. I've tested them out, and they're very good, at least for like creating like research notes and that sort of stuff. So I don't know how much of that is because of all the data that's been trained, because my understanding with those platforms, they had less resources when they were building them, and they're better performing. So I'm not as educated on the engineering, but
and does that mean that they have more information? That's why it's more.
That could be another thing, because in China, they, all the information is collected, and there is no sense. There's less privacy in China, right?
Is there?
Yeah.
Because I thought they operate under their own Chinese internet.
But if you're on that system, the government has the right to access all the data,
But then
and all the corporations have some sort of relationship with the government.
So, but how is DeepSeek QC, whatever, like how are they able to get outside of China information? Just say away as
Well, that's the whole issue of like TikTok and stuff like that. You know, like having platforms that other countries, other regions use that, you know, that data sits in a database somewhere in China that early on access it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So that's the controversy. That's what the U.S. is trying to minimize. The one is influence, and then the other is the data
I
protection.
mean, that whole TikTok thing was a joke.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that just seems like they were. It feels like market protection. They didn't want another foreign company to be competing in the market the same way like Facebook or other social.
No, well, market protection is right, but at the same time, like it didn't last very long. So there's
still a deadline. There's still a deadline.
But there must be another bigger problem because to me, I know people make a lot of money on TikTok, right? Like they have a livelihood.
Yes.
So if you disrupt that livelihood, like the impact could be
definitely for those.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I mean, for me, this whole thing, like I've been thinking a lot about it, trying to understand, but it's still very complex, right? And I guess what we're trying to do is like direct the ideal for artists. Like for what I think about is like if I was an artist and there was no acclamations for creating art, and there are some people who, you know, create their own art for themselves, don't really want to make a living out of it, and that's fine. But at the same time, there are people that need to live, right? And so does this demotivate? Like, so you as an artist, would it demotivate you to keep creating?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, right now we still live in a world where we're buying books, watching movies, watching TV shows that are written and made by people.
Yeah.
I don't know what the next 5 years looks like if we're buying books that was like AI generated. I know we're starting to see that creep in. So like let's say the next big anime hit is going to be like 80% AI generated. I don't know how I feel about that.
Why?
Because that it's like that it's an indication that the value of the artist is diminished. Because then, you know, that production, those animators, the people that wasn't.
So you're saying, you know, going back to all the things that we talked about, but you're saying if you don't work for it, it's not.
No, I'm just saying because there are two separate questions. One was an issue of ethics. Yeah, and there's the issue is how I feel with the future of the art, the role of the artist in the future, right? So we're definitely facing an era where that the work that the artist has. So artists have always been in the bottom rung of the economics of like.
No, well, we totally understand because
like they've always been devalued in some way. Like even at those animation companies where you know they produce what the company's selling, but they're you know probably the lowest paid people or less recognized people for you know those productions. But this is even like taking that to a step further where now you know an executive's dream is to be able to make Kung Fu Panda 5 and just be able to tell a computer to do exactly the way he wants it and never have to like deal with an artist.
Right. And so let's say, you know, that was able to happen. Like there's so where my thought is, okay, it makes that guy's life easier, the director of Kung Fu Panda 5, to just prompt it and create it. Now, there's like what's the problem with that? Like if he was able to do that,
generating means lots of jobs.
Okay, but there's gonna be lots of other areas of hospitals, like everything. Like there's gonna be lots of
Right. But
areas that are.
so like your question was about artists specifically, right?
And my question was whether it's going to demotivate you to continue to.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Because like even now, I'm like doing my sketches. I'm like posting my YouTube videos.
You're like, what's the point?
Well, it's just like I'm right now. I'm doing it for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if this was my livelihood, I'd be very nervous.
Mm. Okay. Um, well, for me, my burning question is always like, if AI can generate these things, the originality of artwork or original, would that die? Like,
No, because right now AI is derivative.
Yeah.
Even the example of Studio Ghibli, that's a derivative example. Like it takes a pre-existing thing and just applies it to your photo or whatever context that you throw in it. The new is still coming from creativity, and we don't really understand creativity. We know it's a function of problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't understand inspiration and where it comes from.
Yeah, or your
How we make connections.
ideas, yeah.
So, it's hard to program
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thinking into a model when we don't understand what that process is like, right?
Yeah.
Like we understand how we contextualize information, store information, reproduce information. We understand those things and are just on a function level of their brain. So that's what you're seeing these platforms do. But we don't really understand creativity itself. So
Right. So going back to that Kung Fu Panda example of, creating like the new movie using AI, let's say, and it eliminates, and this person, the director, is able to do that. Now, I see that as, okay, if he could do that, there's so many other artists that you could eliminate that barrier completely, right? Like,
so that was
resources.
absolutely. So like the advent of digital video
Yeah.
was an explosion of people being able to make their own videos, right?
Yeah.
Before it was like, maybe like 2 people you made them known in your personal network that was capable of doing that. No, everyone's capable of doing that. So AI does give democratizes like the ability to express yourself.
But there's a little bit of difference to that. Like if you were making a movie, right? Like I'm not, well, I mean, like if I really wanted to learn and make movies, that's one thing, right? And I have the resources available to me to make that video. But, that talent, does that get changed because of AI?
Well, no, yeah, there's still the quality, right?
Yeah.
There's still the quality of the idea.
Is the quality disparity going to be smaller because of AI?
Well, the execution, yes. Does it look good? Does it look elaborate? Does it look pleasing? I think those things.
And that's all prompting?
That's all prompting. But the idea, is it interesting? Do I feel something? Do I feel connected? Did you speak to me? Those things still come from the person creating the prompt. So I think that's still the gap.
Yeah.
But in terms of execution, like if you're making a film, do you need a DP?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or do you need an art director? Do you need all these different things, right? So those type of things it's going to be interesting how things transform. Like my mindset like a year ago on this was like, I'm going to treat this as a tool. I'm going to look at this as something that I'll try to learn, because if I don't learn it, then I'm just being afraid of it.
You're just going to roll behind, yeah.
But like,
because it's happening no matter.
Yes, but slowly, like I'm starting to see that, some of the concerns and some of the fears that the other artists have said, like I do see it being real issues moving forward, and it's going to be interesting to see how lawmakers handle it.
Yes.
And how companies keep pushing the boundaries of it, and then how artists respond to it. We talked about, I think last week, about shifting from digital art to working traditionally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that seems like a safe area where you have original art. You can buy that original art.
Yeah. And maybe that becomes
a movement,
a novelty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a movement. Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed our discussion. I thought what you said about Sable and these giant companies that have these open AI or and AI development, what they're looking for is one thing, and they need to preach.
Yeah. I mean, they have an agenda,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
So it's hard, like when, you hear Sam Altman on a TED Talk, it's like you have to take it with a real grain of salt.
exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Love to hear what your thoughts are on this. It's a developing topic, and I'd love to cover something more specific if you'd like for us to just focus on that only. Yeah. Please leave us a comment, and until next time.